High in the frozen wilderness of Alaska, surrounded by towering glaciers and endless white silence, stands a place that shouldn't exist. A place built by ambition, powered by copper, and abandoned in a single day. This is Kennecott, one of the richest mining operations in American history, and one of the most dramatic ghost towns in the world. In the early 1900s, Kennecott produced copper so pure that it stunned engineers. A remote industrial city rose in the middle of nowhere. Massive red mill buildings stacked against the mountains. Railroads cutting through untouched wilderness. Electric lights glowing in a region where most people still live by lantern. This was a marvel of engineering, a triumph of human will over nature, a place where fortune seemed guaranteed forever. But fortunes don't last forever. In 1938, without warning, the mine shut down. The workers boarded a train, and Kennecott was left exactly as it stood. Lights turned off, tools dropped where they were used, paperwork still on desks, food still in the pantry, machines still loaded with or that would never be processed. And then silence. The town never reopened. No one returned. No one dismantled it. It simply froze in time, high in the Alaskan mountains, preserved by cold, dry air and deep isolation. Today, Kennecott looks exactly as it did the day the last man walked away. A 14-story wooden mill towering over the ruins below. Broken windows staring across a landscape of snow and ice. Rusted conveyor belts leading into shadows. And the faint echo of a town that lived fast and died instantly. This is the story of America's frozen empire. A city built on copper. A factory carved into a mountain. A ghost town preserved by the cold. This is Kennecott, Alaska, the discovery that changed Alaska forever. Before Kennecott became an industrial giant, it was nothing more than a rumor. A whisper among prospectors exploring one of the most remote and unforgiving regions on Earth. In the late 1800s, two young men, Clarence Warner and Jack Smith, were traveling through the mountains near the Kennecott Glacier. They weren't expecting to find anything extraordinary. The landscape was brutal, steep cliffs, unstable ice, and endless snowfields. But then Warner saw something strange. High on a cliffside, in a place where nothing should have existed, the rocks glowed a deep, vivid green. He chipped off a piece. It was almost pure copper. Not ore, not traces, but some of the richest copper ever discovered in North America. So pure, you could see the metal shine when the sunlight hit it. Warner reportedly shouted, "My God, Smith, we found a mountain of copper." And they had. Geologists later confirmed what seemed impossible. This wasn't just a deposit. It was one of the largest, most concentrated copper veins on the planet. News traveled fast, but reaching this isolated region was nearly impossible. There were no roads, no highways, no towns, only glaciers, cliffs, and miles of wilderness. But where there is wealth, there is will. A group of powerful investors, backed by the legendary financier J.P. Morgan, formed the Kennecott Copper Corporation. Their plan was audacious: to build a full-scale industrial city in the middle of the Alaskan wilderness, entirely from scratch. This meant carving railroads through untouched mountains, building massive mills on unstable, icy slopes, housing hundreds of workers in brutal weather, hauling copper thousands of miles to the coast, and doing it all without modern machinery. It was a gamble, a billion-dollar risk in today's money, a logistical nightmare. But the copper was worth it, and so the wilderness began to change. Explosions echoed through the valleys. Bridges were assembled over sheer drops. Supplies arrived by horse, sled, and ship. Workers built dormitories, dining halls, hospitals, power plants, and mills, all from timber dragged across endless miles of snow. At the center of it all, rising like a cathedral of industry, was the Kennecott Mill, a 14-story wooden labyrinth designed to crush, sort, and process the world's purest copper. By 1911, Kennecott wasn't a dream anymore. It was a miracle, a fully functioning mining city carved into a mountainside, complete with electricity, heat, telephones, and a railway line that stretched 196 miles through some of the harshest terrain in America. And from the moment the first ore cart rolled into the mill, Kennecott began producing copper at a scale no one had imagined. The money flowed. The town grew. And for a moment, it seemed unstoppable. But every boom has a cost. And in Kennecott, that cost was waiting deep beneath the ice. Life in a frozen empire. How people survived Kennecott. Kennecott was not a normal mining town. It wasn't lively like the boom towns of Nevada, nor rowdy like the gold camps of California. It was something entirely different. A self-contained industrial fortress built in the coldest, most isolated corner of the American frontier. Life here demanded a different kind of strength. Isolation. Workers lived at 4,000 feet of elevation, pressed against a mountainside where winter lasted 8 months and storms could erase daylight for days. Temperatures plunged far below zero. Winds screamed through the valley like a living thing. Outside the mill, the world was snow, ice, and silence. The nearest major settlement was days away. The nearest city? Weeks. Discipline and precision. Inside the mill, everything was the opposite. The entire operation ran with clockwork precision. Ore came in, processed through a maze of wooden chutes, steel conveyors, crushers, and sorting machines, all stacked vertically to use gravity as power. Workers labored inside a deafening world of machinery, or tumbling down chutes, belts rattling, stampers pounding, the massive building shaking with every load. The air was filled with dust and cold drafts that slipped through the wooden seams. But the process never stopped, day or night, winter or summer. The workers, most were young men from all over America, drawn north by promises of high wages. They lived in bunkhouses that clung to the mountainside. Meals were served in a large mess hall. Hearty stews, breads, meats, strong coffee. They needed calories just to survive. There were strict rules. No alcohol, no rowdy saloons, no gambling goals. Kennecott was corporate, organized, efficient. A mining town without the chaos. A company town. Everything belonged to the company. The homes, the hospital, the power plant, the school, the store, even the railroad. It was a world wrapped in red buildings and white snow, fueled by copper and discipline. A strange beauty, and yet many remembered it fondly. They described the sound of the mill echoing across the glacier, the way the northern lights shimmered above the red buildings at night, the camaraderie of men working together in one of the harshest environments on Earth. But beneath this life, something darker was forming, a realization that the mountain's rich copper would not last forever. Deep inside the earth, the veins of ore were changing, thinning, splitting, fading, and the town built on a miracle was about to face the truth that no one wanted to accept. The fall of an empire when the copper ran out. For nearly 3 decades, Kennecott produced some of the purest copper the world had ever seen. Tons of ore flowed through the mill every day. Fortunes were made. Industries across America depended on the metal pulled from this frozen mountain. But no matter how rich the deposit, no matter how marvelously the machines performed, one truth could not be escaped. Every mine runs out. Deep underground, the veins began to thin. Miners followed them mile after mile, carving tunnels through unstable rock, chasing the last remnants of the great copper body that had built a city in the wilderness. At first, the decline was subtle. Ore grades dipped slightly, then significantly, then alarmingly. Engineers tried to stay optimistic. Managers spoke confidently, but the reports told the truth. The mountain was emptying. By the early 1930s, the Great Depression struck the United States. Metal prices collapsed. Demand evaporated. Mining became a losing battle. Expensive, dangerous, and rapidly unprofitable. The once thundering mill slowed. The giant conveyors rattled with less and less ore. Bunkhouses emptied as workers quietly left, knowing the end was near. And then came a moment Kennecott feared. In 1938, after extracting over 4 million tons of ore and generating wealth that reshaped American industry, the Kennecott Copper Corporation made the announcement. The mine was shutting down. Completely. Immediately. No warning. No long transition. No gradual path. Just one decision. And the entire town was finished. The abandonment. On the final day, the remaining workers boarded the last train out of the mountains. They left quickly, taking only what they could carry. Everything else stayed behind. Machines still loaded with ore. Tools lying where they were last used. Records stacked on desks. Coats hanging on hooks. Dishes in the cupboards. Boots on the floor. Lamps on the tables. It looked less like a shutdown and more like an evacuation. And then, for the first time in 30 years, the mill went silent. No more pounding of ore crushers. No more roar of generators. No more locomotives climbing the mountains. Just wind, snow, ice. Nature reclaimed the valley, slowly but powerfully. But in a twist no one expected, the cold, dry Alaskan air preserved everything. Wood didn't rot. Metal rusted slowly. Documents remained readable. Buildings stood like skeletons against the glacier. Kennecott wasn't destroyed. It was frozen. A perfectly preserved industrial ghost city. A time capsule of the early 20th century. And in that stillness, the legend of Kennecott began to grow. A city frozen in time, the modern ghost of Kennecott. Long after the last train departed and the final worker vanished into the Alaskan wilderness, Kennecott remained untouched, unmoving, and astonishingly preserved. Where other ghost towns crumbled under rain and heat, Kennecott endured under ice and silence. The cold became its guardian. Snow sealed the roofs. Dry winds kept the wood intact. Isolation protected it from scavengers and vandals. And the mountains themselves acted like walls, shielding the towering mill structures from time. For decades, few people saw Kennecott with their own eyes. Pilots flying overhead described it as a red city clinging to a glacier, looking impossibly alive from the sky, as if workers might walk out at any moment. Explorers who reached it reported a surreal experience. Desks still covered in paperwork. Machinery in mid-operation. Rails filled with their carts. Personal belongings left where they fell. The hospital lined with empty beds. Oxygen tanks, medical records, and instruments untouched. Nothing looked staged. Nothing looked cleaned. It looked paused, like an entire industrial city had taken one breath and never exhaled. The national park era. In the 1980s and 1990s, the U.S. government recognized Kennecott's importance. The site was incorporated into Wrangell St. Elias National Park, the largest national park in America. Preservation teams worked carefully, reinforcing the structures without altering them, protecting the town under a philosophy similar to Bodie. Preserve, but do not restore. The 14-story wooden mill, one of the largest wooden structures ever built in North America, became the centerpiece, a cathedral of beams, chutes, and shafts standing against the mountains like a monument to human ambition. Visitors from around the world began making the long journey to see it for themselves. The collapsing staircases, the rusted tools, the enormous sorting machines, the narrow walkways suspended over dizzying drops, the stark contrast of red buildings against white snow. Kennecott didn't feel haunted. It felt alive in its silence, as if the last workday had ended just minutes ago. The legacy of Kennecott. Today, Kennecott is one of the best preserved industrial ghost towns in the world. It represents the extraordinary lengths humans will go in search of wealth, the impossible engineering feats of the early 1900s, the fragility of industries built on finite resources, the suddenness with which a thriving city can die. Above all, Kennecott teaches one unmistakable lesson. Even the greatest empires can vanish overnight, but their stories endure. The buildings still stand. The machines still wait. The mountains still watch. And the town that once fueled America now exists as a frozen time capsule, resting beneath glacier winds. A testament to ambition, ingenuity, and the silence that follows when the last train leaves. This is Kennecott, Alaska, the copper empire abandoned in a single day.